Okay, I've been saying it. I have been saying it. What did she know? When did she know it? Who did she speak to? Who did she communicate with? What did she do? Or what did she not do about it? Hey everybody, Damon Roberts here. In this video, we're going to talk about the extraordinary report put out by Jim Banks, Rodney Davis, Jim Jordan, Kelly Armstrong, and Troy Nehls. But first, I want to remind you, this video is brought to you by MyPillow. Use our code LFS6B at checkout for 10 to 60% off most items. All right, so we have all had a stomach this wretched January 6th witch hunt, one-sided partisan hack committee with their only goal of getting President Trump to not be able to run or to get him indicted. Meanwhile, they haven't produced one shred of evidence that ties Trump to actual incitement, to being the reason that people actually went into the Capitol and did what they did. Instead, they focused on his inactions, what he didn't do. He took too much time to do this. He sat and watched TV. He didn't tweet quick enough. He didn't talk to his supporters quick enough. All we've heard about is what he didn't do. Well, if what someone didn't do is the bar, then I say keep the January 6th committee open, restock it after January 3rd, and let's get the real investigations with the real witnesses under oath, and let's get them going. Witness number one, Nancy Pelosi.
Around 30 or so Republicans sent a letter to you and Congressman Lofgren about apparently being monitored by Capitol Police, and they want an inquiry into this. Congressman Nehls is saying that you have used the Capitol Police as basically weaponizing them against members of Congress, basically monitoring them.
Don't waste your time. I have no power over the Capitol Police. Does anybody not know that? The Capitol Police have responded to that gentleman's allegation, and that stands as what it is. But I have no power over the police. Thank you all very much.
Whoa, Nancy seems like she was in a little bit of hurry there out of that when you look back on that now. Grabbed the mask in the middle of the question, looked a little uneasy, wanted to get right out of there. Let me save you your time here. I have no power over the Capitol Police, she said, as she rushed out of the room, grabs her mask, looked a little bit uncomfortable there for me. And I wonder why that is. Well, I wonder if that's because she knew at the time that she was full of it. And that's what we found out in this report that just came out. Report of investigation, security failures at the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Prepared Jim Banks, Rodney Davis, Jim Jordan, Kelly Armstrong, Troy Nehls. And I want to take you through some of this. And I want to get to the highlights. Obviously, I would encourage all of you to spend some time and go through it. It's fairly easily, it's nicely written, fairly easy to read. And it tells you a lot about that day that you certainly didn't get from the Salem witch trials. I could tell you that. Executive summary, leadership and law enforcement. I've highlighted some of the parts that I want you to pay attention to. Leadership and law enforcement failures within the U.S. Capitol left the complex vulnerable on January 6, 2021. The Democrat-led investigation in the House of Representatives, however, has disregarded those institutional failings that exposed the Capitol to violence that day. Oh, geez, I wonder why. Because that doesn't serve the purpose of making sure Trump can't run or getting him indicted, which was the only purpose of this sham committee. They had no interest in doing any real work. They had no interest in getting to any real information to help the public understand what happened that day. As if you read this report, they knew what was coming. They knew how undermanned they were. They knew how understaffed they were. They knew that the Capitol Police didn't have equipment nearly enough to deal with what they thought was coming. They knew all this. More importantly, she knew all this. Specifically answering the important question of why the Capitol was left so unprepared. Executive summary. There are several reasons the Capitol was left unprepared on January 6, 2021, including internal politics and unnecessary bureaucracy. Also, guess who? Prior to that day, the U.S. Capitol Police had obtained sufficient information from an array of channels to anticipate and prepare for the violence that occurred. However, officers on the front lines and analysts in the Capitol Police's intelligence division were undermined by the misplaced priorities of their leadership. Those problems were exacerbated by the House Sergeant at Arms, who was distracted from giving full attention to the threat environment prior to January 6th by several other upcoming events. The then House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving, who served on the Capitol Police Board by virtue of his position, succumbed to political pressure from the office of Speaker Pelosi and House Democrat leadership leading up to January 6th. He coordinated closely with the Speaker and her staff and left Republicans out of important discussions related to security. As a critical member of the Capitol Police Board, the House Sergeant at Arms had an obligation to all members, staff, and Capitol Police officers to keep them safe by consulting stakeholders without partisan preference. See, that's hard to do when you're dealing with Pelosi, because there's nothing that's not politics with her. So it's almost impossible to do that. But rather than coordinate in a meaningful way, Paul Irving only provided information to Republicans after receiving instruction from the Speaker's office. In one case, Irving even asked a senior Democrat staffer to act surprised when he sent key information about plans for the joint session on January 6th to him and his Republican counterpart. The senior Democrat staffer replied, "I'm startled." Just think about that. Hey, act surprised even though you already know. Don't give it away. Key findings, and I've highlighted the ones that deal with Pelosi. The Speaker of the House and Democrat leadership were closely involved in security decisions in the lead up to and on January 6th. The House Sergeant at Arms took direction from the staff in the office of the Speaker of the House and intentionally excluded Republicans from key meetings and conversations related to House security. Staff within the House Sergeant of Arms office emailed Paul Irving that January 6th was Pelosi's fault. Let me read that one again. Staff within the House Sergeant at Arms office emailed Paul Irving, who was the House Sergeant at Arms, to keep everybody who they are straight here, that January 6th was Pelosi's fault. Widespread concern from Democrat leadership over optics in the aftermath of Summer 22 Black Lives Matter protests prevented early deployment of the National Guard. The House Sergeant at Arms was compromised by politics in the lead up to and on January 6th and did not adequately prepare the Capitol for possible violence. All right, page 24 of the report. The U.S. House Sergeant at Arms was compromised by politics and did not adequately prepare for violence at the Capitol. On February 9th, 2022, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said, quote, "I have no power over the Capitol Police." That's the clip I just played you. This is false. Documents provided by the House Sergeant at Arms show how then House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving carried out his duties in clear deference to the Speaker, her staff, and other Democrat staff. The Speaker's statement created uncertainty and confusion with respect to the historical reporting structure for the HSAA and the Capitol Police. House rules dictate in several circumstances that the Sergeant at Arms is to report directly to the Speaker of the House, including when the House is in session 4, the Sergeant at Arms is to, quote, maintain order under the direction of the Speaker and other presiding officers, and execute the commands of the House and all processes issued by authority thereof directed to the Sergeant at Arms by the Speaker. And of course, everybody knows this. This is why we all said from the jump, well, what did Pelosi know? What did she know? Who was she communicating with? What did Mitch McConnell know? Who was he communicating with? Did the two of them communicate? This is what we've talked about all along, because everybody knows that she's the one who in the end makes the final calls here. Pursuant to the House rules and for other reasons, the Sergeant at Arms in practice serves under the direction of the Speaker. Accordingly, the Speaker and other Democrat staff routinely have meetings with the Sergeant at Arms and staff. This dynamic is not unique to this Speaker of the House, Sergeant at Arms. Indeed, because the Speaker is the highest-ranking constitutional officer of the first branch of government, this structure is neither novel nor controversial. What is novel, however, is a Speaker who denies the relationship and ignores her office's obligation to secure the Capitol, perhaps in an effort to shift blame. Well, that's the nice way of saying it, shift blame. To me, there was a devious action here going on in her mind. Because say what you will about her, she's got it, unlike Biden, she's got it all here. She's actually operating 4 steps ahead. But it's usually to see how she can undermine something. That's the problem. The Speaker's office was heavily involved in planning and decision-making before and during the events of January 6th and micromanaged the Sergeant at Arms. I'm telling you, she knew that this could get out of hand. That factored into everything she did leading up. That factored into decisions she made before. That factored into decisions she made that day. There's no doubt in my mind, all she had in her mind was how this was going to play out. She knew how it would possibly play out, and she knew what it would look like for Trump. That's why she did everything she could to undermine the president that day and almost push this to what it ended up being. All right, so just to recap a little more of this from Just the News, John Solomon has a very fine report on this. He says the revelations released Wednesday in the House GOP report obtained by Just the News are prompting serious questions about whether the January 6th Capitol breach could have been prevented, while creating a new push for Republicans to summon Pelosi for testimony after they take the House next month. Troy Nelson from Texas said January 6th should have never happened. The reason there wasn't a proper security presence on that day goes right to the Speaker's staff and to the Speaker's office, added Jim Jordan, the soon-to-be chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. And Jim Jordan appeared with John Solomon and Amanda Head on their very fine show, Just the News, No Noise, on Real America's Voice. And here's what he said.
Remember that one email, too, where they talked about the optics of having the National Guard's presence here and the proper security posture. And as you go back and look at the communications, there's this pattern that develops where the Sergeant of Arms is meeting with Pelosi's staff. Many of those meetings, Republican staff wasn't allowed to be there, but they had this pattern where everything had to be run through her office, her staff, before the Sergeant of Arms could make a decision. So much so that even he was able to call out the National Guard, but he wanted to run it by Pelosi's office first. That's, I think, the pattern that emerges. So, yeah, the reason there wasn't a proper security presence on that day goes right to the Speaker's staff and the Speaker's office.
The Republican report, which also included the work of Jim Banks, Rodney Davis, and Kelly Armstrong, provided a meticulous, fact-based recounting of how Pelosi's staff began meeting and communicating with security planners in the House Sergeant at Arms office in early December 2020, continuing all the way through the final 48 hours before January 6th. Those communications were occurring as Capitol Police began receiving detailed intelligence that extremist groups were discussing storming the Capitol, attacking lawmakers, targeting the tunnels beneath the complex, and blocking the planned certification of the 2020 election. Capitol Police whistleblowers told the congressman there were ample and detailed warnings that violence would occur on January 6th, but the leadership of the Capitol Police failed to adjust the security plan to address the threat, while the political leadership in Congress repeatedly refused to provide resources to secure the building. One officer discussed how he went to the Capitol unaware of the threat assessment with only a police cap as his equipment. Others revealed that congressional security leaders turned down resources like armed officers or National Guard troops ahead of the tragedy because of the concerns about political optics. The $600 million a year Capitol Police was set up to fail, and there have been scant signs of progress towards addressing these weaknesses since the attack, the lawmakers warned. While the mainstream news media and Democrats have suggested Pelosi and congressional leaders were not to blame for the security failures, internal messages of House security planners pointedly slammed Pelosi and her congressional appropriators for failing to provide the resources needed to secure the building. After Pelosi forced House Sergeant of Arms Paul Irving to resign following the devastating events of January 6th, a staffer in the House Sergeant of Arms office sent a stinging email suggesting that the Democrat leadership had made Irving and Capitol Police Chief Steve Sund the fall guys to cover up the failures of lawmakers to provide adequate security resources. In that email, which I have read, it's in the report, and again, I encourage all of you to go download this report. I'll link to it in the description below. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and then you can read the report right down below. I'll link it down there. Read this email. And in part, it says, for the Speaker's knee-jerk reaction to yesterday's unprecedented event, and God knows how Congress lives for its knee-jerk reactions, and to hell with future consequences, to immediately call for your resignation after you have been denied again and again by the appropriations for proper security outfitting of the Capitol, and I wrote several of those testimonies, dang it, and to blame you personally because our department was doing the best they could with what they had, and our comparatively small department size and limited officers' resources, and because other agencies stepped in to assist just a fraction too late, again, for Congress to demand your resignation is spectacularly unjust, unfair, and unwarranted, the staffer wrote to Irving, according to the email included in the report. This is not your fault or Son's fault. If anything, appropriations should be hung out to dry. The new report also corroborated prior reporting by Just the News that Capitol Police began receiving specific warnings in mid-December that there could be significant violence planned against the Capitol. See, folks, the reason you're not hearing any of this is it cuts directly against this whole January 6th waste of time. This was not anything spontaneously incited by President Trump's speech that day when he said we're going to patriotically and peacefully march down to the Capitol. They knew all of this well before that day had even begun to unfold. That's why you're not hearing about any of this in the media. The Capitol Police issued a statement Wednesday night and did not challenge any of the findings of the report, but rather vowed to accelerate changes to improve security. And of course, Pelosi's office didn't respond to comment. Why would they? So there you have it, folks. Once again, what did she know? When did she know it? Who did she communicate with? And by the way, Mitch McConnell's not off the hook here either. What was he doing that day? Did he talk to Pelosi? What were the communications between those two? Because he was the leader in the Senate and has been, unfortunately, for quite a while now. What did he know? But this just goes to show you, this whole January 6th committee and the fact that there was two so-called Republicans up there is the biggest bunch of crap waste of time that we've ever seen. And if the Republicans were smart, they'd keep this damn committee open. They'd restack it after January 3rd when they take control and start calling witnesses, because we have a whole new playing field now. They've laid the groundwork for what can and can't be, from subpoenas to not showing up for subpoenas, for the punishment for that. So it's all hands on deck here, and we should be all in on continuing this and get some real investigations going with some real witnesses, and we'll get to the bottom of what really happened that day. Because so far what we've been given is just a bunch of crap. So, all right, that's going to do it for this one, folks. Make sure you visit our sponsor, Mike Lindell, mypillow.com/LFS6B. If you use our code LFS6B at checkout, you'll save 10 to 60% off, and we certainly do appreciate when you do that. All right, that's going to do it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.